Hello and welcome to the first episode of Audio Explained. This episode is going to be kept simple. By saying that, I mean your average Joe, your average person will be to understand what I'm saying. No technical terms. So no field parameters. Alright, let's start off with what we got over here. We got three speakers. We got this big speaker over here. This one has a woofer, mid-range and a tweeter. This little one here has a woofer, mid-range, tweeter. This one has a full-range speaker. Now, say you've got your money, you're all ready to go buy yourself a sound system. What do you buy? That's the question. First, use your ears. Listen to the speaker. If it sounds good, you're off to a relatively decent start. But it's always good to actually look at a speaker, feel a speaker, see what's going on. All right. So this speaker here is a three-way designed loudspeaker. It's got a woofer, it has a mid-range, and it has a tweeter. The tweeter does your highs, your hi-hats, all those little all those high sounds. Mid-range does, well, what I'm doing now, voice. That is mainly what it's for, talking. You've got a woofer, that does bass. So your cello, your kick drum, synth bass, dubstep, all of that type of stuff is what this bugger here does. This one over here is a two-way design speaker. This is a more compact design. These can be a lot bigger. But this is the one I have on hand and it's what I'm going to use. So instead of having the three drivers, we only have two. The tweeter does the same job as this one over here, just it has a bit more of an extended range. So your tweeter, your mid-range is doing voice on a two-way speaker. It's got to do the treble and a little bit of voice. Most of it is being done by this, but this driver is also doing bass. It's not a bad thing necessarily. If they designed it well, it's going to do it all just fine. There's going to be no problem at all. A full range speaker, this one driver has to do all the work. Your bass, mid-range and treble. It's got to do everything. It's a hard job. It's got a hard life. Now, say both of these speakers here are $1,000. Which should you buy? That one. The reason why you should buy this one, even if they're the same size, they've most of the time will have put more engineering into getting this speaker to do its job properly. Say this one is also the same price, but you've got more drivers. They've had to split the cost of the speaker into them. So this driver is going to be a bit more cheaper than these two drivers. So technically, this should sound better. It's not always the case, especially in the second-hand market. A lot of people don't want big speakers like these anymore. They want little speakers like these. Now, if you are doing it second-hand, basically meaning someone's owned it previously, so a Goodwill, your thrift shops, all those types of shops, eBay, Gumtree, Craigslist in America, you're going to find things like this for very cheap. But there's more you've got to look out for. It's not as simple as going and buying a speaker. There's something called foam rot you've got to look out for. That's where the edges here, this is called a surround. Basically, it seals in the driver and allows it to move and it flexes freely. As you can see, no problem at all. Now, a lot of time with older speakers, this deteriorates. What you want to do is you want to get your finger, lightly rub it over it. If bits fall off it, unless it's a really good speaker, stay away from it. Or unless you want to recone a speaker. Reconing basically means, or refoaming is the actual term, basically replacing this. These have actually had it replaced, I did it myself. You also want to look out for the mid-range and you want to have a good look at the tweeter. If there are little bits missing from the dome's poked in, stay away from it as well. Another thing you want to do, make a fist and go bang on the side of the speaker. That will give you a relatively good idea of how thick the wood is. Thick wood is good wood. Thin wood is bad wood. That means it will resonate more. Resonance is good. Too much of it is bad. A speaker like this has really thin wood. You can hear it's very boxy sounding. With this speaker, has a nice thick sound to it. This will quite mostly sound like my wall. It's thin wood, it resonates. Thin wood resonates. Thick wood, not so much. That's the type of wood you want to stick with. It's better. Now, another good way to tell wood size, you turn your speaker around, look at the edges. Not all speakers have this exposed, but a lot of the older ones do. You want to gauge the thickness of it. So this is 1 inch all around. That's good. That's really good. Where we look at this cheaper Pioneer speaker over from the 90s, it's very thin. Not good. If the speaker's plastic, the knock test also does work on that. Sounds solid, it's good. You want to stay away from thin wood, and you also want to look out for this type of thing. You see the wood here has come up. See, this is fine, water's got to it. And when water gets to most woods, it will go, it absorbs the liquid and expands. That's not good. That is going to be the first fail point of the box. Now, speaker drivers, like these are made of paper. This is made of carbon fiber. This is made of plastic. This is aramid fiber. Aramid fiber is usually yellow, same as Kevlar. This is what's called composite material. If you look at the back, it's paper. Look at the front, it's got a coating on it. Basically, the coating makes it stronger. In this case, it didn't really help. A paper speaker can sound just as good as any other. Do not buy into the hype of, oh my god, my tweeter's made of diamond, my woofers are made of carbon fiber. This sounds good. It's crap. Some of the most expensive speakers in the world are using paper cones. If this material is so good, why aren't they using it? I know Bose and Wilkins like to use diamond tweeters, but to your average user, titanium and your basic textile domes sound just as good. You're paying for marketing hype. Marketing hype is something you've really got to look out for, especially on speakers, because they'll say things like it's got an aero port and it's got a vaporized dome tweeter and vaporized cone woofer, and you hear all these types of words. Don't listen to it. It's bullshit. It's literally bullshit. You've also got to look out for speakers from this era. This is the 90s. The 90s was a turning point in audio because everything got plasticky. You'll have heard the term BPC, which means black plastic crap. And in this case, it applies. Plastic, fake drivers, nothing real good here. Thin wood. Some people charge huge amounts of money for these speakers. I don't know why, but stay away from it. Especially here, because these drivers here, they're fake. They're not real. Where each element here is absolutely 100% real. Same on this. And this is the period of speaker you want to stay with. Your 70s and 80s. Because when we got to the 90s, something changed and speakers became cheap. And not cheap in a good way. Sure, you can buy 10 of these for the same price as a pair of these, but you're better off just going for one set of speakers. Now, running multiple speakers in a setup, not always a good idea because the two drivers can do this. It's called out of phase. And when that happens, the certain frequency, it cancels itself out and you lose everything, or at least 90% of it. Now, going to a second-hand shop is always a risk with speakers. If you can test the speaker, that's great. If you go into someone's house, make sure you can listen to it, make sure it works. I've got a friend and for some reason he keeps buying speakers and he goes, oh, they don't work now. And I said, did you test them? And he's like, no. I'm like, well, why not? You're buying something from someone. You are obligated to be able to test it. You want to make sure it works and you get your money's worth. Unless you're getting a speaker like this for $5 a pair, then who cares? But make sure you do your homework on speakers as well. You go to a second-hand shop saying you see a pair of speakers, whip out your mobile phone, do a Google search for it. That's the simplest thing you can do. Do a search, see what other people have to say. That's also a good way of, it's not always a good way. I mean, you get a lot of fake reviews, fake news. But it's a good overall way of telling if a speaker's any good. Now, a speaker like this is better overall for sound, a three-way design, because you're splitting up the frequencies. It can be a lot better. But a good designed two-way speaker will be just as good as a three-way speaker. Me personally, I like a three-way design speaker because, you know, it looks cool. That's actually kind of it. It looks cool. My personal thing is, the look of a speaker matters. This should not apply to you. I'm different. I'm weird. But how a speaker looks also does matter to a lot of people, especially to me. Mid-range driver, make sure you push back on it. It's nice and firm. If it's really loose, it may mean the enclosure inside which separates the mid-range and the bass has become damaged. And if this starts moving, you don't want this to start moving too, because that creates distortion. Distortion, to put it simply, is it sounds crap. Unless it's like a tube amp or something, and that distortion is good distortion. But that's a different type of distortion altogether, and not something I'm getting into in this video. Now, if you see something like this at a thrift shop or something, push in on the cones like this, make it like that with your hand, go like that. Make sure there's no rubbing, nothing like that. Same with this. Your tweeter, you can't really test it on the spot. And the tweeters normally on speakers are the first thing to go, because people who don't know anything about it will turn the volume really high up, and what will happen basically is clipping. Clipping is where the amplifiers run out of power and you're just basically shoving whatever's coming out of the wall into it, kind of. And it will take out the tweeter first, because the tweeter is the weakest element of the speaker. Most time DC voltage will bypass the crossover and do heavy damage to your tweeter. So, to sum it all up, look for two-way speakers if you're buying brand new. If you are budget conscious, look for a two-way speaker. If you've got a bit more money to spend, go with a three-way speaker or a floor standing speaker. But if you're on a budget, stick with a bookshelf. Bookshelf is better for the value. And a lot of people today, not everyone's doing so well. So either go second-hand, big speaker, or go small speaker. Until next time, thanks for watching.